Hello, Create Schools. Today we're looking at the second video of the League of Nations. It's actually the first video because the organization was divided into two parts because it's so long. Sorry about that. So we are looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the League of Nations, and this is the overall strength and weaknesses. The last time we were looking at the organization itself, thinking about what's strong. So now we're going to take a look and pull that apart and say, okay, so what made it strong? What made it weak? So go ahead and get out your piece of paper and your pen. Your subtitle is the strengths and weaknesses of the League of Nations, or actually that's your heading with chapter make sure it's written chapter 2 on there so you know what chapter we're talking about. And let's move on and take a look. So first we're going to look at the strengths of the League of Nations. And so in the beginning, everyone was really excited. 1919, the little baby League of Nations is being delivered to Versailles, and they're all excited. 42 countries had joined. We have our superpowers, Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. They were all in the council, so they're ready to go, and they're ready to make everything good. And so they've got the Treaty of Versailles, everyone's agreed to it, Germany's signed it, and so those are your main strengths. You had lots of countries joining, we had the big superpowers behind us, and we had this lovely document, the Treaty of Versailles. So, will the stork make good as, it says, will the stork make good as to this infant? It's kind of an oddly worded thing, but basically, is that stork going to bring that, is that everything going to be fine? Is it going to work? So there's our strengths. Pause the video if you need to write those down. And I'll go on to the next one. And here's our weaknesses. So as we learned from the previous video, neither USA or Russia were in the League. Without these great powers in the League, it was too weak to make any big country do as it wished. So here we've got our little political cartoon over here. There's Uncle Sam. You can see with his top hat. And it says 40 nations agree upon the League Peace Pact. So 42 nations, actually what it is, they agreed with the peace treaty, or the League of Nations. We've got Russia and Mexico that didn't join. And they're just kind of looking on, seeing what's going on. So the assembly is another one of the weaknesses, as I already kind of alluded to. It could only make unanimous decisions. Remember, unanimous means everyone had to agree. So it could never really make any decisions at all. The council, all the permanent members had a veto. Okay, and so means that they could just say, no, we don't want it. So basically, if Italy did something bad, they could just say, I don't agree with what's going on. We're doing what we want to do. Economic sanctions were not very effective. So we're going to kind of take a look at both the economic sanctions and the military sanctions really soon. So, but just go ahead and write that down, because when you go back and study your notes, you'll understand what those means. So I'll explain it later, not now. So pause the video, go ahead and write those weaknesses down, and I'll move on to the next slide, and you can join me when you are ready. Okay, so just to sum it up, the three strengths of the League of Nations and the mnemonic word of summary. So basically we're just kind of repeating what we said, but I want to give you this memory word, sum. It was set up by the Treaty of Versailles, which is one of 14 points. So those members had that Treaty of Versailles right behind them, although Wilson didn't join, so that's actually one of those weaknesses. Okay, next, it had a universal membership, which means each country had to sign the covenant promising to support the League. So the covenant basically is your agreement. They signed it, and with that signature, they say, we will support the League's decisions. So when we talked about the international justice, that is basically the only thing that they have that says that they will abide by those laws. Okay? So, and finally, the M in sum it up is they had the means of influence, the covenant, which is that piece of paper, that group that everyone had to sign. And there were 29 articles, that's what they're called, but they're rules, which each member agreed to follow. Then when they signed that covenant, they said they would follow, and they had collective security, which is Article 10. So there's that word coming up again, collective security. What is collective security? I will explain it. You'll finally get to know. Do not memorize the words collective security. It's okay if you don't know it's Article 10, but you've got to memorize the words collective security. And here it is. But wait, pause first. Finish writing these down. If you have to go forward and find out what it is and then go back because you just can't wait because it's so exciting. What is collective security? She's finally going to tell us. Anyway, pause the video and I'll move on. So here is collective security. So the scroll on the right, you do not need to copy this. These are the actual words in it. The members of the League undertake to respect and preserve, as against external aggression, the territorial integrity and existing political independence of all members of the League. In case of any such aggression, or in the case of any threat or danger of such aggression, the Council shall advise upon the means by which this obligation should be fulfilled. So that is the actual wording. Again, if you didn't understand that, that's okay. I will explain it to the left. You may write that down or you may not write it down. You might wish to quote it in the test. It's up to you. So here it is, collective security. It is the assistance to be given to all members that experience aggression by other countries. Collective security just means that we're going to help you guys in case you are hurt. In case someone attacks you, we will help you. In case someone is mean to us, we will help you. And that they all know that if something happens to me, someone will help me. And I know if something happens to them, I will have to help them. And I will help them because when something happens to me, they will help me. So here's the way we do the collective security. So when they're talking about collective security, they are talking about these three things right here. Moral condemnation, economic sanction, military sanction or force. Okay? So condemnation and sanctions are, you will see it's moral sanctions, moral condemnation. You will see both words. You'll see them both used sporadically, so just kind of remember them both. Basically what moral condemnation means. So moral is appealing to your moral, the way you feel, the goodness in you. Okay? And that is public opinion, and they're trying to convince people to do the right thing. So with moral condemnation, the first thing they do is they go to the bad country, the aggressive country, and they say, could you please not do that? That is not very nice. Now, of course, I'm sure they use different words than that, but if we, just think about it in general, that's what it is. They're like, please don't do that. It is not nice when you do that. They deserve this. This is their thing. Please give it back. Be good. And that is moral condemnation. That actually works quite a bit if you think about it. When your mom does that to you or your teacher does that to you, it actually kind of works. So an economic sanction, that's the second one. Economic, here's that word again that I said make sure you memorize. Economic has to do with money, the economy, how thing works. Sanctions, economic sanctions just means they refuse to trade with them, which means, so we've got our two countries, and the one person says, so the League of Nations says to the aggression, the mean country, and says, if you do not stop this, we will stop trading with you. Now, usually they say what they're not going to trade. Okay? So let's say they say, okay, it's a big person that we buy their sugar from them and we sell them iron. So they'll say, we will stop buying your sugar. We will stop selling you our iron if you do not stop it. So often they say, oh, that's actually going to hurt us economically. It's better if we just, we'll stop, then we can go ahead and do our trading, because there's these 60 countries behind them saying that they're going to stop trading with me, and then my country is going to stop because I'm not going to have enough money. Except, don't forget, America and Russia are not part of the League of Nations. So if they can't get the iron from Germany, excuse me, not Germany, but Britain, then they would get the iron from maybe America. So actually the economic sanctions is not that powerful without having these big, powerful countries involved. And that's one thing that made it weak. So finally, they could go into military sanctions or use military force. They could send an army in there. They can say, okay, if you don't Morally, we can't convince you. Economically, we can't convince you. We're going to send a military, and by might, by force, we're going to make you. And this is a nice community of power all acting together. This military goes in, they fight. This is exactly what the UN does right now. They send this military in, and they fight, and they make them do what they're supposed to do. But there's a problem. We're talking the 1920s here. World War I just happened. The League of Nations does not have their own army. The UN does not have its own army either. The League of Nations does not have its own army. Britain and France's armies have been really lowered because of the war. A lot of people were killed. And actually, the people don't really want to send their army into these other countries. So then they could say, I don't actually have enough people to spare in order to send a military. I can send, this many people in. And the people say, I can send these many people in. And it's just actually at this time in the 1920s after World War I, not enough people. So that actually isn't very good either. So to sum up your collective security is that they're all going to work together. They're all going to try to protect them. They're all going to make everything, make sure no one attacks anybody within the League of Nations. But when it comes right down to it, the three ways that they're actually going to do it are not very strong. So the collective security is a strength in the League of Nations, all working together, but the actual methods are weaknesses, and so you can explain each one of those. Now, all those things I said, you don't have to write down. We will discuss them again. It's a lot of things you also have to think about, and remember, this is one part of the League of Nations, this chapter that I find very fascinating, because there's actually the chance to think, where a lot of this is just points, especially when you get to the next video. It's going to be, this is a success, this is a failure. Even making the next video was a little dry for me, but when I talk about it, I hope I can bring some excitement into it. So actually, what you need to be thinking about right now is, what are there more of? In the League of Nations, do we have more strengths? Or do we have more weaknesses? Okay, so sorry if you didn't finish copying those down. You have to go back. Rewind it just a little. Sorry about that. But if you have any questions, let me know. And now we're going to be able to, the next sections are to look about, okay, so we understand how they're organized. Actually, I will just go back for you. So if you haven't already gone back and need to go back, there it is. Sorry. So now it's time for you to think about the organization. Is it strong or is it weak? There's a lot of good things. There are a lot of bad things. And now next thing we're going to see is, how do they play out in the 1920s? How do they play out in the 1930s? So if you have any questions, let me know.